Right, well, I'm joined now by Ian Puddick. Hi, Ian. Welcome to Dialect.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the invite.
You've come a long way. Where have you come from?
Come from rainy North London to very rainy Bristol.
Now, tell us a bit about your problems you've been having with the police, because a lot of the stuff I've read about you online, anyway, is to do with having trouble with the Met, mainly.
No, actually, it's not. It's the City of London counter-terrorism directorate.
Okay, right. So I'm naive, aren't I, thinking that the City of London police are the same as the Met. They're not separate.
No, completely separate.
Well, actually, funnily enough, the City of London, I'm thinking you probably know a bit more about this than I do, but the City of London, isn't that kind of separate to London anyway?
Yeah,
it's almost
completely.
like am I right in thinking the Queen has to actually ask permission to go to the City of London?
She does.
Amazing. Anyway, so what are the City of London police like?
Well, they know me. They know me extremely well, and they were very kind enough to waste several £1 million worth of taxpayers' money investigating me under the auspices of counter-terrorism, Operation Bohan. It has been debated in Parliament. Parliament, when they asked how much it would cost, the police actually said it would cost too much to cost the operation against me, and therefore weren't able to say how much they had actually spent.
Okay, so why were they knocking on your door?
Primarily, I was arrested and prosecuted. Initially, it was for a hate crime, but that was dropped by the Crown Prosecution Service. And what they said I'd done, I had done. So there's no dispute about the actual charge, and I'll explain what the charge is. The charge was creating and distributing a website. Now, the website was, or is, policeexpenses.co.uk, so that website still exists. Initially, the police categorised my website as a hate crime, and as I said, that charge was dropped. They then classified it as a harassing website, and that's what I was prosecuted for. But I'm very proud of my website. I went to Speaker's Corner every Sunday for 14 months prior to my trial. I was arrested at Speaker's Corner. I've had my house raided by the terrorism squad. I've had my company. I've got a small business. I employ 15 people. That's been raided by the counter-terrorism police. My company accountants, who've got absolutely nothing to do with any of this, they were raided by the police. So they spent a lot of money on trying to get some dirt on me. It was a huge.
So you're saying this is a fishing expedition.
Huge fishing expedition.
What was the original excuse for that then?
Well, the excuse for this, you just couldn't make up. And I hate saying this because it's really easy to detract from the real story and get onto this other narrative. But in a nutshell, I found out a few years ago that my wife had been having an affair with her boss, and however unpleasant that is, these things happen and they always do. It's the other chap, for example, it's no more his fault than it was my wife's fault. You know, there was an affair, end of story. What I did at the time, we decided at the time that we were going to try and work on our relationship and see if we could make it work. She was his secretary. It wasn't going to work while she was still working for him. So I rang him up, no guns at dawn, was very polite, very pragmatic, and rang him up with a view to saying, look, I appreciate and I know what's going on. I'd like my wife to be moved. Well, I wasn't able to say that because the phone went down. I was told to bog off, for want of a better word. So what I did do then was I called his boss, the chairman of the company, and his company is called, the company in question, it's a company most people wouldn't have heard of. It's a company called Guy Carpenter. They're the world's largest reinsurance brokers. They insure the insurance companies, and they're the largest reinsurance company to the aviation industry. So I've rung the guy up in the first instance. That didn't get anywhere. The next day I ring up the chairman of the company, and again, just asked for my wife to be moved. I didn't demand it. I didn't say it had to be that day. It could have been in 6 months' time. But it's just that we would have a chance to work out our relationship if she'd moved. The chairman was great and moved her. And that's when all my troubles began. The chap that had the affair with my wife, or vice versa, obviously the chairman had to speak to him and say, look, I've had a call from Mr Puddick, what's going on? He denied it all and said, look, the guy's nuts, he made it all up. Well, that's fine. But what he did do is he then reported me to his local police for harassment. One, for calling him, which I did do, and two, for calling his boss. And the argument that the police put forward, by calling his boss, that had a harassing effect on him. Anyway, the local police were good enough to suggest that it was a they didn't proceed. The sergeant at his local police force down in Sussex, no crime debt, said that it was a civil matter, not a criminal matter, that my behaviour was reasonable. That's what the sergeant wrote in his notes. And that was the end of the matter. Well, it wasn't, because the chap concerned was embarrassed. And he went to a private security company called Kroll. I don't know if you've come across Kroll, Tony. He went to a private security company called Kroll. When I say he went to a company called Kroll, his company that he worked for owned Kroll. Kroll were on the next floor. So he had a chat with the managing director of Kroll. The managing director is a guy called Benedict Hamilton. And Benedict Hamilton, in an email, which I have, which we used in court, confirmed in writing that he'd spoken to the local police force, who had refused to get involved, stating it was a civil matter. However, in his email, he states that he's got friends at City of London Police, whom he has spoken to, and Detective Chief Superintendent Steve Chandler and Detective Chief Superintendent Jeff Davis, in the email, confirmed that they would use the counter-terrorism directorate and considerable resources to investigate me. So we've got one police force just saying it's a load of nonsense, we're not getting involved, and we've got the others saying we've got a lot of money here and we're going to chuck it at this and we're going to use counter-terrorism. In the first instance, my wife is then brought in and she's questioned, and she's accused, and you couldn't make this nonsense up, she's accused of conspiracy to pervert the course of justice for making up the affair. Now, she obviously confirmed that to the officers that there had been an affair, and they just were having none of it. They were just saying, no, we believe your husband and you in a conspiracy together. You're going to blackmail this guy. They're throwing all this nonsense at her. But the real story here is, if we just stop now and just say, right, okay, we imagine this isn't a big corporation that's involved and it's a milkman. I've just found out my wife's been having an affair with a milkman, the postman. I've rung the dairy. I've rung the post office. Would the police be doing this? And we know that it's a rhetorical question. It wouldn't have happened in a million years.
So what has this taught you then about the way that the City of London Police operate?
Well, I try and be as balanced as I can, and thanks for that. So, is every single police officer at City of London bent, corrupt, and dishonest? The answer's got to be no. But based on my experience, would I trust them? No, I wouldn't. And they all stick together. And I think the big problem with corruption in the police is not the bent cops that do the bent and corrupt things. It's the good officers that look the other way and pretend it didn't happen, which in my eyes makes them corrupt.
Don't they have to do that in a way, because otherwise they'll be sacked themselves?
Well, yeah, I mean that's basically what everybody says. But the reality is, the police PR on these matters are that the public are the police are the public. We're one united. We're all together, and it's complete and utter nonsense, because the police hold a special position in society. Because unlike you and I, they swear an oath to uphold the law, to tell the truth, to do the right thing, etc. You and I haven't sworn that oath, I don't know if you have. But the police do. That's why when we go to court, if the police...
But also we pay their wages to tell the truth.
They're public servants.
Not to lie.
They're public servants. And the point is, when they dishonour their oaths and they lie and cheat and do all the dodgy things that they can do, that they dishonour the oath that they swore to uphold.
I seem to remember a book called The Filth, I think it was, which came out in the 1990s, where one of the, and this is Scotland Yard here, one of the ex-drug squad officers, I can't remember his name now.
Was it The Infiltrators or The Filth?
The Filth, I think it was called. He said that his fellow detectives in the drug squad were the best organised criminal gang in the country.
Yeah. I mean, Sir Robert Mark, who was a former commissioner at the Met Police, said in a statement publicly that he would like to catch more criminals than he employs. And in his book, he actually states there were sections of CID that would not, he's the commissioner, wouldn't acknowledge him, wouldn't speak to him. He'd walk down the corridor, they'd look the other way because they disliked him because of his stand on corruption.
Fascinating. Do you think there's been any proper investigative journalism over the years into the police?
No.
Because, I mean, we're not really expecting the police to investigate themselves very well. That's bound to not be working. I mean, with the IPCC, it's well known that they're not actually... They do occasionally pick something up, but usually when there is some external pressure of some sort. But we expect our national journalists, particularly in London, to be investigating the police? I mean, and we know they're not doing so much nowadays, but do you know of any really good investigations into them?
No. Well, in terms of external investigations,
what about historically? I mean, there has been some good television, hasn't there, over the years?
Yeah, I mean, there's a great, there's a wonderful documentary made by World in Action called "Cleaning Up the Yard," as a pun on or play on "Cleaning Up Scotland Yard." That was it's a 1 hour special. It's a phenomenal film. It was they made the film, then it was banned by the Home Office. I did manage to get a copy of that, and it's on my.
So was it ever actually shown on television?
No, it wasn't. No.
Amazing. So World in Action made a film, but they couldn't show it.
Yeah.
But the Home Office decided
it wasn't in the public interest. But it's on my
probably
website.
Was actually in the public interest
completely
for it to be shown.
Completely in the public interest.
I mean, there's a problem is we know in all sorts of banana republics with the police corruption.
Yeah.
But what about over here? Are there any kind of signs that corrupt, crooked police are being actually prosecuted or removed?
No. I mean, I'll give you a perfect.
Are they getting rewarded? Is it going the other way?
Well, they get rewarded because there's revolving doors to go on to work for private security companies like Kroll. So that's where that's the corruption. That's the.
Tell
corruption.
us a bit about Kroll then.
What would you like to know? The managing director of Benedict Hamilton, he in a statement actually before my trial, I got an anonymous phone call telling me that said I'd messed with the wrong people, that they had deep pockets and they were going to F me like I'd never been F before. Now and when that call, it could have been one of my mates teasing me at the time, I was all paranoid. It's pre-trial. I had absolutely no idea where that call had come from until I got a police statement from the CPS, from Benedict Hamilton, and he says, I purchased a clean phone, which is basically a euphemism for a pay-as-you-go phone that, if you put a fiver on it and chuck the SIM away. And he said, I phoned Mr Puddick and told him we warned him that he had deep pockets. But
why did he put this statement?
I've got a clue. He just did. He did. So, I mean, at my trial, my barrister was able to say, look, Mr Puddick was the guy receiving the threats here. We're going to F you like you've never been F before. And I have to say, he did keep his promise. I mean, they completely wrecked my life at the time. Well, they tried to. They did everything they could.
So let's talk a bit more about your business and your personal life and how that was affected by all this.
Well, my personal life, everything went on to hold. I mean, my business at the time was turning over £1.5 million. And I was so angry with what the police had done to me. When they brutalised me in that room at Snow Hill Police Station, when I complained they wiped the CCTV and the officers said they didn't deny roughing me up, they just said they couldn't remember. And when we got to my trial, the judge said to me, and I told the judge about all the things that the police had done to me and why I felt that I should go out to public. And I put banners up I put on my website, I bought 20-foot banners, and I put them on every single, this is not an exaggeration, I put them on every single road bridge on the M25 and the M23 going down to Brighton. And as they came down, I'd put them up again just to get my website, policeexpenses.co.uk, out there. And I just said to the judge that these guys swear an oath to uphold the law and then they just go and do whatever they want. And I just said, I'm not going to let them get away with it. I was so upset. I walked out the station when they roughed me up in tears. I'm a big guy. I was frightened. It's the first time in my life. As an adult, I'd been frightened. As a child, I'd been frightened loads of times. But, when you say to people, when were you last frightened? I don't mean anxious, scared, or a bit intimidated. I mean frightened. It's not an emotion that you generally experience as an adult. And I came out of there completely out of my comfort zone from the public servants that we pay to protect us in tears.
Well, somebody has said to somebody, put the frighteners on him.
Yeah, and it worked. It was the guys at Kroll. The guys at Kroll's. My barrister in a recent TV interview said that Kroll in the interview, he says Kroll were running the show. They were running the case. They were sending emails to the police, telling the police what to do. At my trial, the judge was appalled, and she actually stopped my trial at the end, just before the end, and she said, I want those two police officers who weren't part of the case at this point. She said, I want those two officers here within an hour, the two officers that had roughed me up in custody. The first officer walks in, my barrister's firing questions at him. He just has complete amnesia cannot remember a thing. The second officer, Sergeant Ellis, who roughed me up in custody, he says, yeah, I remember taking Mr Puddick into that room at Snow Hill Police Station. I've just remembered what it was all about. While I was searching Mr Puddick's property, I'd found a large quantity of crack cocaine. So I'm behind bars in the dock for my stupid website, which I very proudly created. This guy's in the witness box, lying through his teeth. I shouted out, the judge told me off. I was so angry, I called him a liar. And my barrister said, so where did you find the crack cocaine? And he said, I found the crack cocaine in the kitchen, in the bedroom, and in the loft room. So my barrister said, so it was really a large cachet of crack cocaine. And he said, yeah, that's correct. And he said, and what else did you find? He said, I found all the paraphernalia. And he went into detail describing all the paraphernalia that he also found. And my barrister just took a completely different tact and just said, how many officers were searching Mr Puddick's property? You're in charge of that search of Mr Puddick's property. How many officers there? He said, due to the passing of time, I can't remember, the old amnesia nonsense. And my barrister said, you're in charge. They were there with you. You must know who was there. And he kept trying to get out of it. My barrister said, was it 1 or 2, maybe 3? And he said, I just can't remember. I think it was around those figures. So my barrister read off a whole load of names, and we got to about 12, 13. The judge intervenes and says, how many officers were there, Sergeant Ellis? And then it turned out there were more. So he made a complete mockery of himself. So then my barrister said, okay, so you're in the kitchen, you found the first collection of crack cocaine, you've now discussed it with the other officers that were with you. And he went, no. He said, but you had to have discussed it with them. You found the crack cocaine, you've got other officers standing next to you. They'd be in my flat, they would have been bumping into each other. So he said, no, I didn't discuss it with them. He said, but you made a little note in your notepad. And he said, no, I forgot. He said, but you confiscated it. He said, no, I didn't. And I kid you not, I'm not making up. So my barrister said, okay, we understand that. You're under a lot of pressure. You're under a lot of pressure. You forgot to take the crack cocaine. He was mocking him. He said, now we move into the bedroom. You found the second lot of cachet of crack cocaine. You know what I'm going to say. He forgot to tell the officers. He forgot to make notes. And he forgot to confiscate it. So we then get to the third instalment. My barrister says, and okay, we move to the loft. And then my barrister said to him, did you confiscate anything at all from Mr Puddick's property? He said, yeah, we took his mobile phone, his tablet, his iPad, a digital camera, and a computer. And my barrister said, what did you do with those? He said, we sent them all off to the high-tech crimes laboratory for forensics analysis. And he said, and did you find any evidence of any criminality on having forensically analysed any of those things? And he said, no. He said, okay, so we got to the loft now. So you found the third cachet of crack cocaine. Don't tell me you forgot to take it because you were busy confiscating the computer, the laptop, all this kind of stuff. And he just said, yeah, he'd left it all there. So the crack cocaine technically is still in my house. But what was really telling, and this is where Kroll come back in, 3 months before my trial, my house was broken into, my flat, my property was broken into, and they stole all my court defence papers. Now, what was interesting, I had a box with all of my court papers on it and my iPad. They lifted the iPad off and just stole the box of court defence papers. Now, in my property, I've got a unique piece of art by Damien Hirst. It's about £1,000. It's in a clear Perspex box. That was in my property 3 months before. Whilst giving evidence, Sergeant Ellis described that piece of art, but he wasn't in my he wasn't. That was there when my home was burgled. Mr. Ellis hadn't been into my property for a year and a half before that. I hadn't bought that piece of art then, so he was there a year and a half before I'd bought that art. So how was he able to describe a piece of art that was in my home that wasn't there when he was there? I hadn't bought it yet. So there's all these questions, the $1 million question, was he in on the raid? Was he on the burglary? I don't know. Was he briefed by the burglars? Possibly. But it's just a whole can of worms. And then after my trial, I complained to the IPCC. He's committed perjury. He's conspired to pervert the course of justice. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. He did when he lied in that courtroom. He broke the law. He broke a law or some law. And then a second officer, Tony Wayne, comes out of the woodwork and says, do you know what? I was on the search. I saw all the cachet of crack cocaine. I forgot to take it. I forgot to tell anyone. Silly old us. So you've got two officers who have sworn an oath to uphold the law and tell the truth. They are believed. And the police then created a secret intelligence file on me as a suspect crack cocaine dealer. You couldn't make that up.
Amazing. But I mean, one thing I would question you there is because, I mean, if you hadn't bought this artwork a certain period before the police searched your home, and you're saying that I mean, just get the timing of that clear. So you're saying that the
police are in my home in August 2009,
doing a search,
doing a big search. The artwork isn't there because I hadn't bought it.
Right.
I buy the artwork a year later. Then after that,
and it's at that point that there's a
burglary.
Some sort of burglary in your home
after
you bought the artwork, and yet he can describe that being on the wall.
Yeah,
amazing. Well, it does seem like
TARDIS.
maybe
he had a TARDIS.
So how has this all left you with your business and your family? Your family, your relationship with your wife, for example.
Yeah, well, my wife, we tried to make a go of it, and we started the process of getting divorced. Unfortunately, and the irony, the sad thing is that it's not the divorce. The divorce wasn't caused by the affair. It's not, you had an affair and hit her over the head for the rest of her life over that. I mean, I wouldn't do that. I'm not like that. The fact that I still tell the story about the police, sadly, has an effect on her, but that's not the motive for sitting here with you today to bash my wife. As I said, it's a story that I'm so angry that the police can abuse their power and get away with it so blatantly. I was due to give evidence to a parliamentary select committee. I had meetings with Keith Vaz, went down to Parliament. I was due to give evidence. I'm looking forward to it. They're going to get both barrels. It's going to get the story out there because the story's not been covered really in the mainstream media. The mainstream media has covered my story as a battle between me and this chap. But you never hear me talk about him. I've never named him before, never do it now, because I don't want it to be about him. The minute I say, oh yeah, Joe Bloggs did this, it becomes about me and Joe Bloggs, and I'm very, very careful to avoid that at all costs. I did before and I still do now. And then 2 weeks before I'm due to give evidence to Parliament or to a select committee, I'm told that I can't. And the reason was because I'm under active investigation as a suspect. I've never even smoked a blinking cigarette, let alone seen drugs. And I've got a house full of crack cocaine. Why aren't they coming back to get it? Why aren't they coming and arresting me? So I've just done a freedom of information request actually to City of London Police, asking for a copy of the destruction order. They haven't replied.
So what about your business anyway?
Thanks for asking. Yeah, the business is back on track. We all bashed the bankers, including me, but my business was completely saved by my bank. We were on the verge of going bust for the very simple reason there was a smear campaign. This is by Kroll. It's got nothing to do with police and or anybody else. Before my trial, all my suppliers were contacted. My accountant was called anonymously and told that I was a convicted drug dealer. My suppliers were all called and said, did you know Leak Busters Limited is just on the verge of bankruptcy? So all my suppliers ringing me saying, look, we've heard you going bust. We want to get our money out of you while we could. And I sat down with all my suppliers, well, not all of them, because most of them, when they rang up, I just said, look, it's the first I've heard. And they took me at my, there's a few that were really unsure. And I said, look, if you want to come up now, right now, and check my accounts, and if you see us on a cliff and we're about to go bust and you want to pull your money out, then that's fine. And I said, look, we are struggling. I'll tell you that for free, but we're not going bust. And none of my suppliers pulled out. So there was a smear campaign to do that. But for the year and a half prior to my trial, I was out at Speaker's Corner every Sunday. I was during the week outside the police station with a banner. I was putting up banners on road bridges. I was going around the country giving talks on police corruption. And I completely neglected my business because I was so angry that the police could do this. I was not going to let them lose on any count. So, lost a lot of money. I really don't care. Money's not my God. It never has been. But the important thing was just winning and exposing the police.
Where can people follow your work online or Twitter or whatever?
Yeah, on Twitter, I'm reasonably active, as you probably know. It's my name, Ian Puddick, Puddick. and my website, which is policeexpenses.co.uk. And
So it's still there, is it?
it's still, yeah. I mean,
Why did you decide to call it that?
well, when I was trying to get my message out there initially pre-trial, if I was going to tell my story, if I put a banner up saying ianpuddick.com, would you look at it? We both know the answer. Of course not in a million years. So I was just trying to think of some clever way to engage people. And I just thought, police expenses, people might look at it. I'm not suggesting they will or would, but there's a better chance of them looking at police expenses rather than Ian Puddick.
And from all of what you've been saying, Kroll sounds like the rather nasty factor in all of this. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you think it actually works behind the scenes then with the
got-
ordinary police? Not that the City of London police are really ordinary in any kind of normal sense of the word, but how is it really operating behind the scenes? And is there money changing hands?
Well, I mean, the answer to that is I just don't know. Obviously, I mean, I hear all the stuff about Masons, and they're all everyone's on dodgy handshakes and money, and do those things happen? I'm sure they do. The reality in my case is it's more. I believe it's more to do with revolving doors. For example, statistically, a lot of senior officers from City of London and the Met go to companies like Kroll where they work as consultants after they've
Is there
retired.
more like Kroll that we should be keeping our eyes on?
Well, there are, but Kroll are the big boys. I mean, for example, Kroll launched something called Operation Martin against me, something I was able to get as part of my disclosure. They got a High Court order. This is Kroll, not the police. They were able to get my personal bank details, to get my business bank details, to get copies of my telephone records, and to get the content of my emails and texts. And the reason they did that, they did an ex parte hearing with a High Court judge. So that means Kroll go to court without me being notified, so I can't stand there with a lawyer and say we need to question this. And they did that by saying that Guy Carpenter, the reinsurance company, are the world's largest aviation reinsurer, and they are getting a terrorist unknown threat against them, and we've been brought in, so we don't want to get this into public because of aviation and terrorism, and the judge granted the order on the basis of their lies, and they said there were significant and substantial threats against employees of Guy Carpenter, the insurance company.
Well, obviously, I mean, we could look at that and say, well, it wasn't true. So is there any...
Well, we've got an email from Benedict Hamilton, an internal email, saying what they said and stating, yeah, it's not true. Well, there isn't. So in his own
I mean,
email...
that's some sort of, at the very least, perjury of some sort, isn't it?
Well, I'm a crack cocaine dealer. What would you expect? I mean, the whole thing is based on a tissue of lies by the police and these security.
So, yeah, but I mean, ultimately, if people do tell lies in those situations, they're themselves perverting the course of justice, or it could be for a police officer misconduct in public office. These are all very serious criminal offences.
Yeah, but nobody...
Misconduct in public office, I think, I'm right in saying, is up to life in prison.
Yeah, but who's going to honestly investigate it and take action?
I suppose there's this other side of things, which is the state doesn't want to ever find itself guilty, isn't there?
Well, the state protects the state. That's the problem. So, for example, a good example of police corruption and how the police deal with it is Detective Chief Superintendent Tony Lundy. There was, again, a World in Action documentary. And cut a very long story short, some FBI wiretaps informed Scotland Yard that in 1986, £100 million worth of cocaine was coming in to the UK. That's in 1986. The wiretaps from the FBI picked up that the crooks or the baddies had a mole or someone helping them at Scotland Yard that was going to make sure that the drugs could get to where they need to be away from the police. They did an internal investigation, found out it was Detective Chief Superintendent Tony Lundy, and he retired on in ill health and received an enhanced police pension, not a normal police pension. He got an enhanced police pension. And
So did he get a knighthood?
No, he was taking £100,000 a year cash in bungs from the crooks in 1986.
So I wonder how many police there are out there taking two salaries.
Well,
or three.
They're out there. They do it. They exist.
What about a little bit more maybe before we finish on Kroll, though, because who are the kind of masterminds behind this?
The masterminds in terms of...
Who runs Kroll? Who are they?
The nickname and which they affectionately like is that they are the CIA of Wall Street. So they quite like to play up to that. they claim not to break the law but to sail very close by staying within the law. So they have this perception of veneer of respectability.
So it makes you wonder whether maybe...
crooks,
So are they a US company?
Yeah, American company.
But they've got a big style office in London or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, right on Tower.
Yeah,
right,
the idea is maybe when there's a big financial institution of some sort that needs something doing, which is illegal, that they just pick up the phone to Kroll.
Yeah, and Kroll subcontract that kind of work out
To
individuals who I've come across.
Right. Are they untouchable?
Absolutely, without doubt. Absolutely.
Totally untouchable.
Totally untouchable.
But
Totally
that's extremely dangerous, isn't it? That anybody is so utterly above the law. Is there anything they wouldn't stop at? Murder, for example?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to get into the realms of conspiracy. I mean, my case I know inside out, and very fortunately have documentary proof.
Have you seen anyone else that's been a victim of Kroll? Is there anyone else out there you've come across?
Yeah, absolutely. Richard Chang, his sister's campaigning. He worked at Abbey National. He uncovered fraud. He reported it to the CEO. Kroll were brought in to investigate, and during a meeting with Kroll, apparently he fell to his death.
Oh dear!
You won't read about that too much in the national press, but that's.
So who do you think they're ultimately working for? People like Kroll, just themselves? Are they just is there anybody pulling the strings?
They're paymasters. Whoever pays the highest shilling.
Effectively lawless. But anyway, it's been an interesting journey for you coming up against these people. Maybe you could just remind us about websites and things, places where people can follow you again.
Yeah, you can find me on policeexpenses.co.uk and on Twitter, which is my name, Ian Puddick.
Okay, Ian Puddick, thanks very much for joining us on Dialect.